Sophisticated, elegant, luxurious, and modern. That's how fashionistas describe Vera Wang's collections, and the designer herself. She's royalty by 7th Avenue standards, first an editor at Vogue, then a design director at Ralph Lauren. It was Vera's own stylish wedding that sent her career skyrocketing. Today, her name is synonymous with the bridal business. Hollywood stars seek her talents when they walk down the aisle. And her book, Vera Wang on Weddings, is a must-read for every bride-to-be. To have started in bridal, you're dealing with women at their most vulnerable. Every woman wants perfection for her wedding day and is far more demanding than she would be of an evening gown or a daytime
Well, it's every woman's Oscar. That's what I always say. But in a way, it is true. I think it's your most public moment. And it's also about your most private feelings. So that particular combination is unique. And from the very beginning in the bridal business, I have had very much to deal with clients on a one-on-one basis. And that's given me tremendous insight that perhaps is irreplaceable, I think. To really be with them through this process of going from being a woman to becoming a bride to becoming a mate. And I think that transformation is something that occurs during the engagement process. And as a result, I'm usually the one they call first after the engagement ring. So I sort of live through that transformation with them.
Vera Wang understands beauty better than almost anyone. In fact, visit Vera at her Hamptons home and you might never leave. The gorgeous grounds are not to be believed. This is where Vera Wang, the businesswoman, kicks back, and where Vera Wang, the devoted wife and doting mother, kicks in.
These grounds are so, I mean, you can tell a designer lives here. You know, they are so well designed. It's so beautiful.
Well, I actually love this property. I've had it for over 20 years. And it started off as a very little beach house, and I kept adding on to it as different things happened to me in my life. So when I got married, it got a little bigger. When I had my first daughter, it got a little bit bigger. And after I had got my second daughter, it got even bigger. So now it's really just a great retreat for us as a family. And we can really come out here and just be relaxed.
Which for you is not easy.
You're right.
I loved the fact that you once described what you do as half technician, half psychologist.
No question. And I think sometimes family therapists in some cases, because you get very involved with the families as you're working on this huge event. I mean, it's a life-altering event. And because of it, it's not only taught me to become a very fine dressmaker, but at the same time, it's also taught me a lot about the psychology of women and about women and how no matter what background you come from and you know, what you do, we are all very much connected in that respect. And it's about an emotional moment in one's life and hopefully my ability to tap into that for them. And this is definitely not a show house. It's just a wonderful, wonderful, relaxing escape for our family where everybody can stay in swimsuits all day. They can do sports from morning until night. And, you know, we can just lie around if we want to.
Well, but that's, I think, a big part of it. You know, I think people who have to make big statements with their house are people who may not have the creative kind of jobs where they make big creative statements in other areas of their life.
Vera Wang bridal designs are stylish and elegant, and to think they might not exist at all had more options been available when she was planning her own wedding.
Of course, I know it's an old story by now, but I gotta ask you to do it again. You know, you came to this business out of your own need.
Yes, no question. I was a 40-year-old first-time bride. And, you know, I did have a dress made, and I changed to another dress because I didn't want to look like a bride after the ceremony. And I think what I really discovered was that there was nothing out there for anyone that was a bit older or a bit more sophisticated or a bit more individualistic. And I think that's what really triggered my incredible surprise, because it's hard to believe, even being at the center of fashion, which I was for so many years in another life, that this was not a more developed market. It was just mind-boggling to me that, you know, you couldn't be a young 40.
No.
I'll qualify that.
Or more sophisticated
yes, or
woman.
more fashion forward.
Why didn't you ask Ralph to do it? You were sort of still there.
You remember that story. I was very much there. I think that, you know, I was afraid that because of my enormous respect for him, that if I didn't like the dress, I couldn't be the finicky, you know, bridezilla that I was choosing to be. So I just, you know, thought maybe it was better that I keep my job and and have my dress done elsewhere. But really what happened is I ended up having a dress made. But even so, there was nothing that offered an alternative to me. There just seemed to be this one very formulaic way of looking at weddings. And I think weddings, frankly, were not that newsworthy. You know, when I got married in the 80s.
No, I mean, the whole idea of weddings were kind of on the wane, and now suddenly this is a nation obsessed with weddings.
I tend to think so as well. It's not just my imagination then.
It's just, you
I mean, I sometimes think it's because I'm in the wedding business that I notice all these movies with wedding scenes and brides and celebrity brides and, you know, society brides and all of that. But I do think that, I don't want to take credit, but I think we've been very much a part of people focusing more on the clothing and then, of course, on the bride herself.
Weddings have become, I think, in good part because of you, an expression of style, of a woman's individual style, and it's her way
You're
of
saying
making
this so perfectly, Judy. It's what I hoped we could accomplish. You know, so when people say to me, is there one kind of dress that you do? I say no. I mean, if you were to see any collection we do, there's such a varied amount of looks, and yet I think they're all executed with tremendous style and tremendous design integrity. But by the same token, there are many different bridal personalities in any given line, and I think we go to great lengths to do that. The other thing that's really great about it is that it has 9 bedrooms, and that means we can have a ton of children, relatives, friends, and this is one of those typical weekends to me where there are going to be about 20 people sleeping in this house.
That's great. Then I won't invite myself over. Right? Next weekend.
Well,
I'm
next
coming
weekend.
next weekend.
Next weekend.
One thing about yourself that you would change if you could?
I think if I could change one thing about myself, I would perhaps care less about what people thought. I think that's definitely a throwback to being a woman growing up in the 60s. Certainly, I think it also comes from being Asian and the fact that Asian culture has always stressed very much of what should be done, duty, how you should be viewed, and how you should conduct yourself and how you should behave. I think
Face, the notion of face.
No question, the notion of face and of representing your family, and you know, when you mix that with also the Western concept of empowerment of women, you create a lot of pressure for yourself. And I think I am a product of that kind of double upbringing of, you know, Amer-Asian, and probably the most restricted part of both. And you know, after I turned 50, it was very liberating because I finally felt that I had society's permission to be far more outspoken than I had been up until then. And you know, I think that's something that I'm working on as I go on with my life, as I progress with my life.
Up next, find out how an Olympic setback gave Vera Wang the training needed to get ahead in fashion.
We don't really think of bridal ever as just bridal. We always think of it more as a transpollination of ideas. Sometimes something from bridal will affect an evening gown for the red carpet. I think that's what gives our wedding line such a different fashion dimension than traditional wedding houses.
Vera Wang, her passion for fashion is unmistakable. She's a woman who understands women, and she brings that special connection to every collection. She spends her days surrounded by glamorous gowns, fantastic fabrics, and elegant accessories. She's living every young girl's dream. Yet, this was not her dream when she was a young girl, not even close.
I think what's interesting about your whole backstory that we really have to talk about is the fact that what you really wanted to be was an Olympic skater.
No question. I tell that to my friend Michelle Kwan all the time, and she just laughs and says, yeah. Right. But actually, I do. I admire her tremendously because she could accomplish as an Asian American what I never could. She's been one of the greatest skaters that ever skated. And I know that for me, I certainly had those aspirations, but it didn't quite work out that way.
How old were you when you started? You were tiny.
I was about 8.
Right. And you skated.
And I was competing by the time I was 10 in all the East Coast championships and worked my way up on the East Coast, you know, for about 12 years and loving every minute of it.
And at what point did you know this is...
Heartbreaking. I just knew it was the 1968 Olympics, and I'd been training, and I failed to qualify, and not by little, but you know, by a fair amount, that I realized I wasn't going to be the next in line. And certainly it was the era of Peggy Fleming, one of my best friends. And she was just indomitable. It's like a Tiger Woods comes along, and no matter how great an athlete you are, and you can be a great athlete, you're never going to be that.
Yeah.
And you have to come to grips with your own, you know, limits as far as your talent, and your own, perhaps, inability to be able to realize something, and not just for your championship or yourself, but for a generation of skaters. So.
You must have been devastated, because to get up
Yeah,
there...
devastated. Yeah, because it was totally my passion, and it was something that, you know, I was a very good skater, really, really good, but just not going to be that.
The tennis court is great. I love the color of the tennis court.
And it's getting a little faded. I mean, it used to be really a deep blue. Hi, Ruthie.
No.
It used to be,
Keep playing. No.
Just keep playing.
It's fine.
And it used to be blue, and I loved it because it was very relaxing to look at a blue court. And I know that everybody thought I was really crazy when I painted it that way, but I think I'm gonna have to repaint it soon because it's getting faded.
You've pointed out how similar in a way the fashion world is to the world of skating.
There's absolutely no question about it, because it's a very subjective viewpoint. And I think that designers are so brave because they put themselves out every day for criticism and judgment. And, you know, sometimes it can be well-deserved, both praise and criticism, and sometimes it's not. But you have to be able to pick yourself up and say, well, I do have a special message, or I have a special craft, or I have a special way of looking at women, or whatever your particular philosophy is. And it takes tremendous courage and stick-to-itiveness to keep going.
And you have that. And the 16 years at Vogue were the equivalent, metaphorically, of, you know, the 8 hours on the ice every day when other kids are, you know, out
No
going...
question. And exposed to really the greatest talents in the world. I mean, it's one thing you have to say is that I used to just be so thankful that I got to work with the level of talent that I did, you know, such as an Irving Penn, or, you know, Arthur Elgort, or Patrick DeMarchia. You feel fortunate that all the people that work around you are so talented. And that's an education that's very hard to replace.
No doubt about it, Vera Wang learned from the best. She studied at Sarah Lawrence and the Sorbonne in France. But like every good education, the learning really started at home.
I came into the design business very late, relatively speaking. I didn't come out of Parsons or FIT. I really came to fashion through my mother, and her love of style, and her having lived in a period where women still did dress to some extent. And I think I got such a first-hand education with style and quality and exposure to, you know, European houses, and the kind of education that sometimes you can't even get in school. And the fact that I was able to parlay that into so many years at Vogue, into a wonderful career there, where I was exposed to really the best of everything.
You were a fashion editor, you understood what was going on, you saw everyone, you saw everything.
Absolutely.
And from that you went to Ralph, and you were one of his design directors.
Yes, and I was given a huge opportunity at Ralph because he certainly will be remembered in history as one of not only the great American designers in houses, but certainly one of the greatest businessmen of all time.
Was he devastated when you left?
I know, you have to ask him that. I think, you know, we're still very, very good friends. I adore him. And it's one of those very unique stories. I mean, very hard to, impossible really to replicate, because it came at a time and a place where he really understood, as a psychiatrist again, the American psyche. And he made that American psyche a global psyche, and that's what's so phenomenal about his, you know, success.
It is unusual. I don't think I've ever seen a tennis court quite this color, but it's great.
But the thing I love about it too is that it's just another little bit of a designer element for me. I got sort of sick of the usual colors that tennis courts are. So, and as you can see, my in-laws are playing happily on it. They're big tennis players.
What's the most fun about being Vera Wang?
The most fun. All right, the most fun. I'm thinking hard to answer this. I think I have a very crazy life, but in a way, it's wonderful in its craziness. I mean, I remember, you know, one minute going to the White House for a dinner, but I'm going on the train, so I'm stuck in Penn Station at Nathan's having a hot dog. And, you know, a scant 2 hours later, I'm meeting the President of China. So I think it's the ups and the downs that makes it so real and so wonderful. You know, I could be at a gymnastic meet for my daughter, and the next minute I'm in, you know, the hospital worrying about my father's care. So it's really, I like to think I live a very full life and a complete life. And I think that's what makes my life probably fun, difficult also, challenging, tiring, but also great.
Up next, the guilty pleasure that Vera Wang shares with her entire family.
Vera, what are the 3 things you cannot live without?
Junk food is high on my list. Leggings. I wear a lot of black leggings because it's my pair of jeans for me, only far more comfortable and slimming. And I think the 3rd thing would possibly be anything in cashmere.
Vera Wang designs define luxury. They're always sophisticated and modern. But despite her supersized success, Vera Wang doesn't rest on her past achievements. Instead, she challenges herself every day. And she finds inspiration and creativity flow freely when she's home with her family.
The creativity that goes on here is, I think, spiritual as well, and emotional, because everybody here does their own thing. Our guests do their own thing. Our kids do their own things. My husband has his own hobby of photography. And I think we all come here in order to pursue what we love best in our spare time. And that's what makes it such an unusual home for us.
What is your big guilty pleasure?
Oh God, my big guilty. I think shopping is my big guilty pleasure. I'm a shopaholic. I always say I could win the Olympic gold medal of shopping. That comes from my background. That comes from my mother, my late mother. That comes even from my father. We were a family of shoppers. Shopping was entertainment for us way, way back. That didn't necessarily mean buying. It meant looking, equating, you know, valuing. You know, it was just a great, great family experience. I remember doing it from a very young age, being, you know, dragged around to all the great department stores in New York with my mother, and then later on in Europe with my parents as I got older. But it was something that, I mean, we could be shopping for food, we could be shopping for clothes or a car, but it was just such a family event. And I think because of it, I treasure it even to this day, and do it with my daughters. And, you know, we have a lot of fun just wandering around through stores together.
You come from a privileged background. In a way, you started off on a level that a lot of people had, if they had grown up with the same background, it would have precluded them having any sense of the rest of the world. But
well,
your
I had a
life,
good work ethic.
Yeah.
And a good exposure to, I think skating gave me that. I wasn't very sheltered in my skating life. I was at a rink with lots of other, rink rats. We were all rink rats. And I think kids from a lot of different backgrounds. And that's really how I grew up. And I grew up with that, diner mentality, or that diner taste for food as well. I mean, it's something that stayed with me, and it's something that I treasured. I mean, I really am the junk food queen. I love fast food. I love any kind of food. And I think that there's a certain joy that comes with being able to live like that and really love it. And I think that's what I like best about my life, and hopefully what I can give to my kids.
So do you think that your kids are going to be interested in design at all?
I think they might be. I never would have said that a year ago, Judy, but I think lately they've been far more interested in clothing than I would have thought. And, it's going to be feast or famine there. They're either going to love it or they're really going to hate it.
How do you do this? This is something I wrestle with on a daily basis, so I'm going to ask you. If you're raising kids in some comfort.
Get me on a certain day and I'll, right.
I mean, how do you make sure that they have that same fire in the belly, that same, if it's not a work ethic, that same desire to get out there and mix it up and give it their all? It's very hard. I deal with this.
I think it's very hard also in the celebrity culture that we live in, where Andy Warhol was right. Everybody has about, maybe 15 seconds. Maybe 2 seconds.
Right,
it's faster than he even thought. But I think that it is hard. I think to have kids feel grounded or have a reason to get up in the morning or to value life in all its complexity and diversity is very challenging as a mother or a caregiver. It's, it's hard. I only hope that in my particular case, my kids see it from me and how I live every day, and to set by example, hopefully. And everyone's had, different degrees of success. I don't consider myself a huge success, but I certainly consider myself somebody who has stuck to something. And I think for my kids, if they can at least be inspired a little bit by the fact that I didn't give up on a dream and that I really tried to go after it, that is perhaps a more important part of the process, is going after your dream.
To make it in fashion, you have to stand for something. Vera Wang knows that and knows what she stands for.
You have to stand for something. Otherwise, you'll be hanging on.
I mean, we'll talk in a few years again, but to me, that is the significance, to really stand for something.
Well, but the point is, I have watched you over the years, and you've had leaner years and more successful years, and that's why I'm so proud of what's happening, because the fact is,
you've witnessed those.
I mean, there's not one big name in the fashion world who hasn't, if you stand for something.
There's no question. That is the strange alchemy that you have to somehow come to grips with, and it's not even seasonal, it's hourly, and that's fashion has changed so enormously. It's so much faster, it's so much more disposable, it's so much more available, and I think that any designer who's thinking of really growing or developing a brand has to find an area for which they actually stand for that particular choice that they've made.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's better to have a niche and broaden from that, because people know who you are and what you stand for.
Well, that was exactly my philosophy, as you know, when I started the business.
It's great that your in-laws come here. It's great that your dad is here. It's great that everybody's here.
It's about my, my real life, and I think that I try to make it as such. I try to make my own life, professional and private, all homogenous and all part of who I really am. And I think that's the only way I really know how to live.
Vera Wang does know how to live, that's the point. And a growing number of women want to live just like her. So much so, her hit fragrance is flying off shelves. And then there's the eyewear, jewelry, china, and more. No doubt about it, Vera Wang is more than a designer. She's a lifestyle.
Well, the audience is wildly dedicated to you, because I think there is something that you represent, which is luxury, but luxury that is modern. And there isn't
God,
a
you're
lot of
saying
that
that
around.
so great, Judy. It's wonderful to hear that, because that's very much what we've strove for all these years. And I think that for me, it's been also a vision of what I feel about women. Now, I'm very much a woman's woman, and I think that all the work I've done in my prior careers, certainly my years at Vogue, working for a women's magazine, and working for Ralph Lauren also in his women's divisions, has really been an inspired sort of personal quest of mine, which is very much that I am a woman's woman. I very much relate to other women, and I think if I can bring that into my work and be able in some way, not even to influence so much as to be of help or to be there or perhaps to inspire women, then that is something that is, for me, a wonderful personal accomplishment.
At the age of 15, Jill Stewart sold her first collection of vintage-inspired jewelry to Bloomingdale's, and her clothing and accessories have been flying off the racks ever since. Known for sexy slip dresses and brightly colored floral prints, Jill Stewart designs are a mixture of styles from the 20s to the 60s. The designer finds inspiration in the intricate detail and feminine lines of the vintage dresses she collects and sells at her flagship store in Soho, New York.